burnt, knocked down. But there is a community campaign. There is a worldwide campaign to rebuild, to save this iconic building. And this morning, I am joined by three of the mainstays of that campaign, if you like, the movers, the shakers, the people who are moderating one of the busiest Facebook groups in the world. We have with us Paul Turner, Ian Sandall. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things that you've been doing over the last few months. And if anybody is listening and would wish to watch, Black Country Radio is Facebooking live this first hour at least. So yes, please get onto our Facebook page, and also you can leave us some comments and get involved in the conversation. And Ian, you still got dragged into this a little bit as well, haven't you?
I wouldn't say. I
Public meeting last Wednesday. I'm losing track of time. Maybe the Wednesday before. It looked like it was a full house.
It was a full house, people queuing outside who just couldn't get in because there wasn't enough space for people to get in. That's how strong the feelings are about the Cricket House. I offered to hold further meetings by way of update, but also to ask people, if they weren't able to get in, to come along to one of my events today, actually, at the White Horse Pub. I'm having a sort of talking pints type session for people to come along and ask me questions and get a chance to meet me and get a sense of where I'd like to take this.
So, Paul, tell us a little bit about the Crooked House. What is it?
Well, it's a building that was built in 1765. It was a farmhouse for a while. It later was turned to a pub, but at some point during that time, it started to sink because of mining in the area, and it became crooked and became known as the Sidon House, Sidon being a Black Country word for crooked. It later became the Glyn Arms, which was after the landowner at the time, and then it became known as the Crooked House, partly informally, and then later formally. So it became well known. It became well known around the world. People came from all over to have a look at it, and it was one of those places when people came to stay with you, you'd take them to see it, because it was something unique, something different that people would find enjoyable. First time I ever went there, I was about 6 years old, went down the lane with my mum and dad in the car, saw it and laughed at it. And then after that, we used to sort of, as I got a little older, we used to go down on our bikes, and the landlord had let us in and show us the marble rolling up the ledge. And so we were, we used to like going down there, and they were kids couldn't get in pubs those days, but we went in closing times and the landlord had let us see it.
A sort of place where you were inebriated before you had your first drink. Ian, what's your sort of relationship with the Crooked House?
The Crooked House for me is it's a local iconic landmark. Everybody knows it. Yes, I've been there. I've done the marble. I've done the bottle on the table. I've done the feeling of when you walk in, this kind of completely random you're never going to get anywhere else. This complete frustration and confusion when you walk in. But like many others within the area, seeing those images of it on fire, and then seeing the Facebook images and the YouTube videos of a random act with a 360 excavator, that really captured my heart, and that really put a knife through. You know, there was a feeling there of loss. It was like losing a family member. This building is so well known. Everybody has a memory of it. And I've got to say, we've gone through the anger moments of seeing these images. We've gone through all the feelings that you get of loss. We're now at that feeling stage where we're all still grieving a building. And let's be honest, it's a building, but it's a building with so much emotional attachment that we've just got to keep on. You know, we've got to get this building back.
Now, Marco, you've been an MP a few years now. I mean, I'm sure your caseload, your casework, your email inbox is probably generally quite busy. Has anything ever quite captured your electorate as much as this, and the wider electorate as well?
Oh, no way. No, nothing like this at all. And the moment I saw the first images of it being in flames, I felt like that knife had been stuck into me as well. It was gut-wrenching. It really was. And like everyone here, I have my own personal relationship with the Cricket House, my own personal memories. But beyond our each and every individual relationship with the building, this building represents our heritage like nothing else. It represents the whole process of industrialization of our local area. It represents the coal miners, the limestone workers. It reminds us of our nail makers, chain makers. Everything came through that Cricket House, representing 200 years plus of our history. And that has been ripped away from us in the most brutal of ways, in the most unfair ways. And that's why it isn't just a sense of sadness that we all feel. It's a sense of very real anger. And I had all of these emotions coming together, and I thought, oh my God, if this is the way I feel, just imagine how my local residents feel, those who've even got an even stronger connection because they live next door to it or in the immediate community surrounding the pub. So yes, that's why I also held the meeting straight away, because I wanted for the people I represent and beyond, actually, for them to have this ability to vent their feelings, but also come forward with their own suggestions, because, you know, we now have a complex problem to solve, and very often the most creative solutions come from the community itself. So that meeting I held was a two-way conversation I had with people.
We'll come back to the future in a little bit. But Paul, you mentioned that you'd set up the petition when the sale was going through back in June, I think. That this
no, it was a week. It was a week before the fire, so the sale had already taken place.
So the sale had taken place, because before that it was not absolutely sure what was going to happen to the Cricket House. Marstons were talking about that they'd done some repairs, I think, in the building. They were talking about a sale, weren't quite sure how it was going to happen. But then there was a moment when it hit the news that it had been sold and it was unlikely to be a pub again.
Yeah,
this is sort of about the point you get involved.
Yes, yeah. So I saw that news because of my history with it, and knowing that it had a long history. I didn't even know when it was built exactly, but I sort of discovered that later as I looked into it a bit more. But yeah, I had a chat with some friends, and we said we can't let this happen, and so that's when the petition started.
And I guess what you were looking for at the time was to keep it open as a pub, or at least the building operating in some sort of sense that kept its spirit.
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea about what people can do, you know, about community assets and things like that. I had no idea about that sort of thing. I just knew that we wanted to stop this place from becoming a different, because we didn't know whether there was plans to demolish it, turn it into residential, knock it down and build houses. And we didn't know what they were going to do with it, but alternative use worried us.
Mm-hmm. And then there was that fateful weekend. When did you become aware that the building was on fire?
I'd started the petition, and somebody else had started the Facebook page, and I was invited to the Facebook page by a friend, And I'd just joined up. It was within an hour of me joining, and I was chatting to people about the Crooked House, and suddenly somebody posted the information that the Crooked House was on fire. So then we started seeing drone photographs taken from a zone of the building burning, and just sort of watched the news. And then the next morning, just saw those sort of bare walls just standing, the shell. But even then, we thought, that's okay. This can be redone. It can be rebuilt. But of course, a day later, it was down on the ground. It was gone, which made our job even harder.
And Marco, I guess you'd probably been aware that Marston's, the brewer, had sold the pub. It was going to be closed. You sort of 5th of August, I think it was, Saturday the 5th of August into the morning of Sunday the 6th. What's your initial thoughts when you see the news coming through?
Well, a little like Paul, actually. The moment I realised that it had been sold, immediately I'd got this black cloud hovering over my head, because I thought, this doesn't sound good. Unless it goes to another landlord, something wrong might happen here. We might, in some way, shape or form, not have the Crooked House as we know it today. But never did I think, actually, that we'd end up with a pile of rubble. That was for sure. And like so many others, I just automatically had assumed that it had got certain protections on it, listed status and so on. So I was devastated when I saw those images. It's one of those moments in your life that you'll never forget. And I think so many of us feel that way.
Susan Ann on our Facebook page. If you want to go to our Facebook page, we are live streaming this discussion in the first hour. My grandparents first met there, which led to them getting married and building their family. So Crooked House has set up a generation of people. Leslie Hale, watching from the Save the Crooked House group, I felt like I'd lost a friend. So many happy childhood memories of the old place. And Bill DeKellis says, yes, indeed, it's like losing a family member. Ian, there's a lot of emotion out there.
A lot. There's an awful lot of emotion, and I understand that, to be fair, and I understand all the various emotions that people have, from their frustration to their anger, to their grief, their upset. And quite rightly, the page itself, with 23,000 members, has become not just a campaign page, but it's also become a page full of photographs, memories, right throughout the life of the pub. And there's people on there with stories of meeting their partners, their last visit with their parents before they passed away. There's marriages going on in this pub. People have really, really fond memories. This pub is like a family member to most people, and you can understand the loss that they're feeling at the moment.
The word iconic is bandied around often in the wrong circumstances. Marco, it's fair to say that this pub at the end of a fairly derelict country lane, that it did meet that standard for the word iconic, didn't it? It was different.
It was definitely different, and it just struck a chord with so many people, as Ian had said. So I think the word that perhaps Ian could have used a few moments ago is that this Facebook page is a place for people to grieve, and I think that's literally what a process that people are going through. Can I just use this opportunity to say, these two guys, one to my left and one to my right, who are the main administrators of this Facebook page, are absolute heroes, because what they've had to do in such a short space of time is, as admins to this Facebook group, is moderate it. Because one of the things which I also urge people at the meeting to do was, please let's be very moderate in some of the language you use and some of the statements we make, because out of all of this, we all want one thing, don't we? We all want this to rise back from the ashes, and we want justice served. For that to happen, Ian, certain things need to take due process. Everything needs to follow. And if either I or anybody else says something in a public arena that could jeopardize that process, it would actually be a self-inflicted wound to ourselves. We would not achieve what we wanted to achieve. Now we've got to win, haven't we? We've heard about South Staffordshire Police arresting 2 people, but what needs to follow after that needs to be tested in the courts. And that's where the risk is. So I will be saying to people, please share your memories and all of these things, but keep those comments as moderate as you are able to do. So why I say these guys are heroes are not just because of the campaign that they've mustered, but also because they are literally removing lots and lots of comments that would be perhaps either inappropriate, but also risky for all of us in terms of achieving what we want to achieve moving forwards. So it's really, really important that we do that. And these guys, I've seen them. Their phone has not stopped pinging. These guys have got day jobs, and it's just amazing what they've done. So thank you, guys. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Mark.
And
Okay,
others,
I just want
and
to
others,
I want
and
to
others.
add that there are a
Several,
team
yes.
of other people who are helping us do that. With 23,000 members, it'd be impossible for two of us to do. So we've got a team of another sort of 10 or 12 people who are helping us as well, and thanks to them.
You listen to Ian Marriott on Black Country Week here on Black Country Radio. We're in the studio with Dudley North MP Marco Longhi and Crooked House campaigners Paul Turner and Ian Sandall. And Paul, it's been alluded to there. You set up a petition. That was the first thing you wanted to do. A petition is asking others to engage, to take part, to make their feelings known. And you inherited a Facebook group with over 23,000 people on it. Marco makes a really, really good point. We know that 2 people have been arrested on suspicion of arson, and the police investigations are ongoing. We know that suspicion existed on the morning of Sunday, the 6th of August. And there was a lot of people out there saying exactly that. We think this is arson. And then the demolition on the following week, a lot of people making many comments. How hard has it been for you and your friends and colleagues around this Facebook to try and keep a lid on the stuff?
It's very, very difficult. People just don't get it, and we keep hearing people saying, "Oh, well, it's freedom of speech. Why have you removed my post?" So it might be freedom of speech. You say what you want wherever, but you're not going to do it on this Facebook page, because we want to keep the reputation that we've got. We've built good relationships with the media. We've built good relationships with people like Marco and other people in positions of authority, and we need to keep those relationships positive. And that means that we have to do everything we can to ensure that people aren't saying things which could jeopardize any legal situation.
Always very difficult. And we're still going to leave the fact that there have been 2 arrests and Staffordshire Police are ongoing investigations. And I do echo what everyone else has said here, is that if you do want to comment now, we are now in that very sensitive period. We're now looking to the future. There's been a lot of heartbreak. There's been a lot of concern and fear raised about what has happened. But where do we go from here? A shout out to Stu Hall, who I think was Bill on our Facebook comments, he started the group and had the first video, which has probably gone around the world a few times as well. And Andy says on there, which is, I know, something that you've had some concerns about, looting. There has been looting on the site of the Crooked House. People have been going in there taking bricks, signs. Ian, have you got a message for those out there who might like to collect some memorabilia and sell it on eBay?
This is a message that we've gone over a couple of times, and this is probably about the second dozen time that we've actually answered this comment. Now, we can understand people's thoughts in wanting a memento, wanting a little bit of the Crooked House, maybe because they're thinking that it's not going to be rebuilt and they just want this little thing that they've got. And we understand that. However, the key campaign that we're doing is that we actually do want the Crooked House rebuilt. That's what we're after. And I'm very confident, and I won't stop, and I know Paul won't stop either until this has been done. What we need to do, we need to have as much original components of that rebuild as we possibly can. Yes, we can replicate, as we've seen in the Black Country Living Museum, we can replicate virtually anything. However, we don't want a replica of the Crooked House. We want the Crooked House to rebuild with as many original components. Now, whether that is a dado rail, whether that's all the bricks, whether that is the toilet door for the ladies, we want as much originality as we can. So please, if you do have sitting in your garage, on your mantelpiece, a brick, the letter C or whatever you've got, If you can return it, we can store that safely, until the time we need that is going back up on this building.
I was watching, there was workers on site over the last week or so, and there was a photograph of them lifting brick by brick into I don't know what they call it, the crane,
The grab.
which would normally just like go in there and get it all up. That there were workers literally brick by brick. Now I couldn't work out whether that's part of the investigation into potential arson or whether that is just a recollection that something's going to happen here.
Well, I can explain that. There was a lot of fuss last week Monday, when Marco ended up coming down to the site, because basically diggers had turned up, lorries had turned up, there were people sitting in the road trying to prevent them coming through. And everybody was in a panic because what they thought was that these diggers were going to fill these lorries with rubble and take it off to some landfill somewhere. We eventually got nearer to the site and were able to speak to some people and get some clarification. And they explained that the site was going to be cleared up because there was some asbestos in the cement, so they needed to do it in a certain way. And the next morning, Tuesday morning, the contractors were good enough to hold off and not start any work, although they'd agreed to work with Staffordshire District Council. They waited until they'd spoken to me. I went in there as our representative, and they spoke to me, explained everything. They showed me the method statement of exactly what was going to go on. They reassured me that nothing was going to be damaged. They were going to store the bricks, and they even offered to get containers to lock those bricks in so that they couldn't be taken. So they'd be put on pallets carefully and put into these containers. And they've stuck. The contractors have stuck to everything they promised. They've even provided a portaloo and a hydration station where they put water for people who are sort of standing around the fences. People still standing around trying to make sure they're doing what they said they would, but they haven't let us down at any point. And I've got a good relationship with the owner of the company. I'm able to call him at any time. A lorry turns up, a crane turns up, and I'm, what's going on? What's happening? And he tells me what's happening, and I can feed that through to the Facebook group, and that keeps things calm. If we can feed the information through, then nobody's going to be sort of rioting.
I guess communication is also, sorry, Ian.
Just to back up Paul, I've been to site several times. It's like my second home now. And I'm just in awe that these guys with these 50-ton kind of diggers with grabs on them are so precise. They're picking up burnt remains of a floor beam or a radiator with these mechanical devices with such care, such detail. I couldn't even pick my pen up off the desk with that precision. But they understand the thoughts and the feelings of everybody there. That they're very sympathetic in how they're dealing with the clear up.
It took a little while to get to that situation where we had that relationship with them, but it was reasonably quickly that people started to calm down.
That's right, and Ian, the contractor who is being crazy, I'd like to echo those comments as well. But I think they made an unfortunate start, didn't they? And the way people were being blocked halfway up the lane, they'd moved a statutory notice that South Staffordshire County Council had put in a particular position, and I wasn't being allowed to walk down when I knew that this was wrong. And even the police had got the wrong end of the stick in these circumstances. So that's once we'd cleared that up, and once we'd had a senior member of the management team from the contractor realize actually what was at stake with this job, they completely changed their tack, and they've been faultless since. So we should really emphasize that point.
Yeah.
Susan has put a request for the grandfather clock, which is one of those, often when you see a picture, particularly the interior of the Crooked House, and I remember seeing it myself when I went in, so through the garden at the end, this grandfather clock, which looked completely out of place in a pub to me. Is any idea where that might be?
There is some indication from some video that was taken through the windows prior to the fire that the grandfather clock was no longer there. There was the mark on the wall where it had stood. Interestingly, the grandfather clock was actually straight, even though it looked like it was leaning. Everything else around it was crooked.
So that could be out there somewhere, not destroyed and in good condition. So I think Susan's plea, can we have our grandfather clock back, please? Communication. Marco, I guess in some respects you're going to become sort of a focal point for a lot of the communication that's going on within your role as an MP. Are you happy that the conversations between the West Midlands Mayor and Staffordshire County Council and Dudley Council as well, and you as MPs in the camp, is it good enough? Is it where it needs to be?
So what I'm saying to people is that where we want to go is going to be a marathon rather than a sprint. And there are going to be different pit stops along the way. And along those pit stops, there are going to be different bodies, different people, different entities coming and having something to say about the situation. So the role of communication here is absolutely key. So I met these guys very, very early on, and straight away I said, let's have a quick WhatsApp group so we can immediately communicate with one another. And these guys know that if they need me to put something out, I can do that. If I'd like the Facebook group to receive something that I've suddenly become aware of, I put it on this WhatsApp group and it gets transferred over. So this is really, really key. But you're right. I think it's really important that we work hand in glove with the various stakeholders. And I'd like to thank Sir Gavin Williamson early on as well for his role in setting up a meeting with South Staffordshire District Council, who at this very moment in time are one of the key players in terms of where we move to next, and what needs to happen, right? When I talk about due process. So it's really, really important that we have those relationships. Those relationships are very strong. The district council is very much aligned with everything we all want, and I don't want anything to jeopardize that. So it's looking very positive. And I said so at the meeting. I can't be talking about detail here, but I can give the categoric assurance that the district council are on our side and they're all over this, doing the right thing.
Can I just add to that before we move on? I've got to say that Marco's heaped praise on us already today, and it's completely unfounded. We're doing this for the cause because we want the pub back. However, I've got to praise Marco for his immediate intervention and the way he has recognised the feeling within the community, and he's responded to that absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it also raised our confidence that we could get something done as soon as you got involved, Marco.
I'll buy you guys a drink afterwards.
A lot of money changing hands in here at the moment. But yeah, I think the success of any endeavour requires leadership, and not all leaders seek it. Sometimes leaders find themselves in that position, and I guess that this is where you two came into the picture, because somebody had to be the admin of those Facebook groups. Somebody had to talk to the press in New York and New Zealand. I don't even know what time of the day that might have been. And before we came on air, Paul was saying, he's talking to people at 2:00 in the morning, thinking, I just need to go to bed. So whether you like it or not, you have become the de facto leaders of this campaign. But what is the campaign seeking to achieve, Paul?
The ultimate aim, when we finally get to it, is to be standing in the Crooked House, having our first pint, the new Crooked, or the rebuilt Crooked House. That's the eventual aim.
Yeah, to make those pints rather expensive to start off with.
But we know we've got a long journey ahead of us, and there's other examples, like the Carlton Tavern in London, which it's taken years to get to the point where that's open again. So we know it's going to be a long job.
You listen to Black Country Week. We've got Dudley MP Marco Longhi, campaigners Paul Turner and Ian Sandall from the Crooked House, Save the Crooked House. And we will be talking a little bit more in the second hour about the pub trade more generally, because we have lost a lot of community pubs. These are assets to our community over the last 10, 15 years. And it's so... where I live, I can see supermarkets and apartments, flats that were once pubs that I used to go when I was younger. The Crooked House was a little bit more than that. It was a community pub in the sense that it sat in a community pool, but it had more, didn't it? It was...
There have been comments, and we get quite irritated, Ian and I do, when people say, well, you should have used it and it wouldn't have been sold. And it irritates us because it wasn't the sort of place that you go every week. It was the sort of place that, was sitting there. You knew it was there. It was a tourist attraction. So if you had people come and stay with you, said, let's take them to the Crooked House. They'll like that. And people would see it be unique, their first visit, maybe their only visit in their life. So it wasn't sort of sitting there waiting for. There were some locals, but mainly it was tourism. And I think there could have been more done. I think there's one brown tourist board sign pointing to the Crooked House, and it's opposite the lane that leads to the Crooked House. I don't think there's anyone anywhere else in the Black Country. So I think a lot more could have been done, and hopefully the way that this publicity has changed things and raised the profile of the Crooked House, when we get it back, and I'm going to say when rather than if, that it will be far better known, and there'll be a lot of people waiting to go there.
Within days, particularly of the demolition, but also after the fire, organisations like the Black Country Living Museum were asked, we'll take it on. They closed that down rather quickly. You mentioned there the Carlton pub in London, which was knocked down by new owners, and the local council, I believe, enforced planning regulations, and as a consequence of that, the developers had to rebuild it.
After a campaign, I was actually on the radio last week with one of the campaign leaders, and we were talking about what they did, and they've given us some ideas, and I'm in touch with them so they can give us some ideas about exactly what they did to get to where they've got to now, where the pub's been rebuilt. But their that took 6 years. Mm-hmm. So, it's going to be a long job, but yeah, it's
I know what Paul is thinking here. I couldn't possibly comment further, Ian, is what I have to say at this very point, which is what I think Paul was finding the words to say. But what is really, really important, let's allow all relevant authorities to get on with their jobs in their own way. Let's leave them alone, because if we don't, we will jeopardize this. We have to let due process cover. And you were starting to delve into some of the detail in there, if you don't mind me saying. And quite rightly so, because these are the answers people want to hear. This is what at the point where I will say is I'm feeling very reassured that the council is doing exactly the right thing.
I think the question that a lot of people are asking is, can it be rebuilt? They look at the pictures.
Technically, absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. Will it be the original? No, of course it can't possibly be at this point in time. Ian made the point, please return if you are aware of anything, if you've got something that you've taken. It's very sad when you see those posts on eBay saying for sale, because let's make, we're Black Country people here, we're straight talkers, aren't we? It's theft. Let's call it for what it is. That is theft. So it needs to be returned one way or another. This is about our community coming together. I cannot think of a single other event that has brought the community together in such a way where we are all singing from the same hymn sheet. This has got nothing to do with politics or anything like that. Let's do the right thing. So we all want to see it rise from the ashes. Let's let due process carry on. And please, let's bring back. Can I just say as well, in terms of how we move forward, and I know you've got another session coming on in a bit, this is also about sustainability of pubs. I'm big on pub culture. You might have seen some of my other activities before all of this happened with the Crooked House. It's really, really important that as and when we do see it come back, that we make sure it's on a sustainable footing. And that means a sustainable business footing as well. So it's really important that we look at that. But that also, in terms of protecting existing assets of community values such as this, that we protect them moving forward. And there's a campaign group called the Campaign for Pubs, I believe, who've written a very, very good piece that I'm going to be drawing upon when I go back to Parliament Monday, 4th of September, that I will be drawing from that document in terms of the legislation that needs to be changed. But I know this is part of a conversation later on in this programme.
Diane says it's going to be a long, long road, but hey, CCH can lean on us. We're Black Country, eh? We
exactly.
And I guess, and we were having a conversation off air, and I think Paul, you were saying that this is one of those issues that the last 3 or 4 weeks have been, but for many, many reasons, it is going to slow down. The logistics of it mean it will slow down now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably will need it to slow down soon because we've been absolutely inundated and trying to do all the jobs as well. But yeah, we expect that there will be a period of time where, planning stuff and and other legal stuff is taking place where things go a little bit quieter. We're not sure. Excuse me. We're not sure what's going to happen in terms of when the current contractors leave site, when they finish their work, which is expected to take about a week. And the concern for us is that when the next people come along that aren't trusted as well as these people now are, that we're going to be back to a situation where people are protesting, and we're having to sort of try and negotiate with whoever's doing the next bit of work.
And how, Ian, how do you sort of keep that enthusiasm seems to be the wrong word.
Momentum.
Momentum. Thank you. How do you keep that momentum going now? You've got this huge group of people who are clearly angry. Many say they're grieving. How do you now tap into this to make sure that the campaign continues?
In fairness, my honest answer is we don't have to do a lot, because the 23,000 people are making sure that we don't rest. Thank you very much. They're also making sure that this is a hot topic throughout their families, throughout the region, throughout the world. So it's just the heart wrenching of it that actually keeps the momentum going. People are, like we are, so adamant that this pub is going to rebuild that they won't stop either. So the momentum wise, that's just a natural force of nature that's going to keep on flying until this pub is rebuilt.
Now, Marco, you Crooked House Law, which is a proposal that you're going to, I think, bring forward to try and save places like this. There's somebody on our Facebook group, so if anybody is listening, you can go and watch and see these handsome young fellows in their flesh. But somebody on there has said, and Hull Beach House, which has come to the fore. I think gunpowder plot, wasn't it, where they hid out. Another iconic building locally, which has now been sought for listed status. The Crooked House was not listed. Marco, do you think, in retrospect, that was an oversight?
I think this is something that definitely needs looking at. Now, do I believe, hand on heart, that had it been listed that this wouldn't have happened? I'm not sure, I think it could well have happened anyway. So listing is only part of the remedy, part of the jigsaw puzzle that we need to look at. And as I said, this is a very complex area. And key for me is, yes, there are other assets, other buildings. People have made that point on social media as well, which I agree with. My inclination, though, is that when I've seen law being scuppered, or law being ineffective, or law that's being gotten around some way, it's when it's been too wide in its application. So I'm thinking, but I might be, I'm learning in all of this, I have to tell you, I'm thinking that we need quite a narrow law, which is very transparent and very clear and applicable, in my idea, is to pubs alone in this case. There will be other buildings of merit, without a doubt, but something for pubs alone, because actually they're unique in their business model. They're unique in terms of how we want them to carry on as pubs. If one particular landlord can't make it work, maybe another one can in a different way. And how we bring the law to actually be applicable in these very specific contexts is going to be very tricky for us. Now, if I start adding in other assets of community value as well, then I think it's just going to dilute the thing too much. And it may well mean that others might want to try and find a way, those who want to make a quick buck and get on with it, they'll find a way around it. So the principles guiding me is to make it very specific to pubs at this moment in time.
Now, out of this, we learned very quickly, both Paul and myself, that there was such a lot of things that we could have done if we knew what existed out there. So part of the catalyst for this, yes, we want that pub back. That's beyond question. But me and Paul have learned so much stuff about the availability, what we can do, how we can secure other pubs, that, again, part of this message is that we can help along with Marco, we can help make sure that other pubs do not suffer the same fate. Other pubs and communities can save their own pubs with community asset orders and different things that they can do. So again, this is not just about the Crooked House, it's about every single pub in this land.
Can I just jump in on that as well, Ian? If you look at the legislation and what's applicable to assets of community value, it would be of very little effect to pubs. So having started learning myself about all of this as well in the wake of what's happened, it's not fit for purpose in terms of what we want to achieve for places like the Crooked House, and for it to be a tool that reduces the risk of this happening again. So it's about removing those incentives, bringing much stronger enforcement powers, doing all sorts of things, and actually working upstream. The moment we know that a pub like the Crooked House doesn't fit with the business model of a particular brewery or landlord, and they're looking to sell, that there's actually a law around that as well in terms of who it gets sold onto after that as well. So, for example, as the group that I mentioned a few moments ago, their suggestion would be to look at perhaps selling it only to another landlord for a period of 12 months and see if there's any takers, but also for it to be valued on the basis of what another landlord might value it at, because that might be at a lower value to what the market might value it if it came up for redevelopment for whatever reason. So there's so many things here. This is why I talk about how complex it is. I need to try and bring as many of these factors in while at the same time keeping it simple and unambiguous. So there's some homework to do around this, and I would welcome anybody's help from far and wide in all of this. Do email me at my office on this, please.
I guess it's given rise not only to the phoenix from the ashes for the Crooked House, it's given rise to other conversations, hasn't it, Paul? How do we? Somebody here has described that Thomas was it's cultural vandalism at its worst. I know we've seen in Dudley, the Hippodrome, a Art Deco theatre that's going to be demolished. Many pubs across the Black Country will have been converted into supermarkets and flats, etc. But when I walk down a high street, and again, I've said this on the show many times, go down to any high street in any town, in any country, and look up, because that is where you see the beauty, the heritage, the original facades of the buildings. The Crooked House was a bit hidden, but do you think that this is going to grow, along with things like the proposed Crooked House law, into something more than just the Crooked House?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think if we can get some sort of rule, some sort of law in place that means that somebody can't just buy a pub, knock it to the ground and start building flats, then that's what we want. We want that to happen, because way too many places have been lost. Lots of really old historic buildings that we're not protected in any way, and we need something to protect them.
The old adage, once it's gone, may not be the case here, Ian.
What do you mean, mate?
I know.
Once it's gone,
But use it or lose it as well, Ian.
Once it's gone, it comes back in the case of the Crooked House. But let's not forget, pubs are a centre of the community. They're where friendships are made, friendships are developed. There's conversation, there's banter, there's debate. These pubs, each and every one of them, does have a significance within the community. Yes, they may look a bit tired and a bit ragged from the outside, but inside it's full of life. We've got families meeting, you name it, it all happens within a pub. The world are all set to rights with inside this pub. They are correctly assets of the community, but they're more valuable than that in just having people together.
Ian, I'd go as far as saying that pretty much any pub is much more than just a place where you buy a pint. Pretty much any pub. But if ever that statement were true, it were true for the Crooked House.
It's interesting because you use that phrase, which often gets said, use it or lose it, and that's not just about pubs. That's pretty much about anything that is in our community. But in terms of the big picture politics, the government, for example, what do you think that they could do to protect the pub, the community pub, that as a community asset. Should society, the state, go a little bit further?
My contention is yes, and my natural inclination is always to have less regulation rather than more, but where it's absolutely necessary and applicable, I do believe there's a role for the state, and there definitely is here, because clearly what we do have in place, such as the legislation around assets of community value, it's simply not strong enough, it's not good enough, it's not implementable enough. You can't use ACVs for a pub. So absolutely there's a role for the state, and this is what I said. So there's the bigger picture umbrella envelope, if you like, about the sort of legislation I'm talking about, but I have to come back to the point that I really, at this point in time, need to keep it very specific to pub culture and maintaining that.
Paul, you know, you set up a petition, you took on a Facebook group. You know, do you fancy being the new owner?
No, that's not what I do. That's not. I mean, I'm happy to do what I'm doing in terms of leading the campaign, but when the pub's open again, it won't be me running it.
But you know, again, we're months and years. Are you in it for the long haul now, do you think?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll keep on going until we've got the decision to rebuild the Crooked House, and I'll be in there the first night it opens, and I hope they'll save me a place, because it'll be a ticket-only event.
Well, we'll have a ticket. We can broadcast live from the Crooked House. And Ian, the area around the Crooked House, I mean, there is some history there as well, isn't there?
There is a lot of history. There is a lot of history to this building, as it's been previously mentioned. It was built in 1765. You can tell I've done interviews before. It was turned into a pub in 1830. It subsided due to the mining company that was set up by the owners, Sir Stephen Glynn and Gladstone, his brother-in-law. They were mining iron, steel, ore, coal, clay, and because of this mining, that's what actually caused the building to subside. The building itself was rescued by Wolverhampton Dudley Breweries in the 40s. It was shored up in the 50s, and it's that shoring up has actually withstood that fire. You know, it didn't kind of withstand the digger, unfortunately. But let's put this pub into context of this history. We were standing amongst the bricks the other day doing interviews, and this brick in the hand that we had while we were being interviewed is literally older than the formation of the United States. This brick was being in situ for 20 years before Captain Phillips set sail for Australia. The history in this building, and like it's been said before, it epitomizes every single aspect of our heritage in this area. So it started as a farm. It subsided through mining. It was bought by Wolverhampton Dudley Breweries. Each of these particular aspects are very much part of our heritage in this area, and it represents, every single brick represents our heritage and our Black Country roots.
Ian, I'll just jump in on that. There is a reason why we've been in the New York Times, we've been in the Washington Post, we've been in the Australian Sydney Herald, we've been in Korean newspapers. I was interviewed just 2 days ago by 2 German main broadcasters who came to my office. We've been all over European main broadcasters. This is huge. We will not let this go. This is a message that has to go out today. And it struck a chord. I have someone who contacted me from Canada, someone just like you, a broadcaster running a radio, saying, Marco, I want to help. Guess what? My roots are from Dudley. I want to come over. I'm going to put it on Canadian radio. And if I can help, I will. And I am going to fly over at some point in time, Marco, and we'll do whatever we can from Canada.
And we talk about this being global, Paul. I mean, how far? What's the furthest you've been so far on this multimedia journey you've been on?
I've had a conversation with somebody in New York from the New York Times, and then it's just every media outlet in the UK has been in contact with me. I've
Al
got
Jazeera.
a very long, Al Jazeera. I haven't spoken to Al Jazeera. They contacted you, didn't they, Marco? Yeah, but no, it's just been, there's so many media companies, radio stations, newspapers and TV stations, and they're just constantly, can we do an interview with you?
Mm-hmm.
it's a bit surreal when you're speaking to New Zealand radio, and it's like 10:30 of the morning and the sun is shining, and they're saying good evening, good night. It's pitch black there, and it's really off-putting.
I tell you what, in the next year or so, you're going to become experts at all of this. I want to thank all three of you for this first hour. We've been speaking to Paul Turner and Ian Sandall from the Save the Crooked House Facebook. Is that what, if they want to find it on Facebook and add?
If they want to, yeah. So it's Save the Crooked House, and then in brackets, which was added later, let's rebuild it.
And Dudley MP Marco Longhi, and some or all of us may be staying around in the second hour. Because we are going to be talking about the sort of the wider community pub business in the country, because we have lost a lot of pubs over the years, and for many people those pubs have been at the heart of our community, and maybe there's more we can do to protect them. But to take us to the news from Kingswinford, this is Local Lab.